Hello, and welcome back to Long COVID MD. I'm your host, Dr. Zeest Khan, a licensed and board-certified physician navigating recovery from long COVID. I practiced medicine for nearly 10 years before I fell ill with long COVID, and during that time and the training years leading up to it, I learned very little about fatigue-related disorders. I knew very little about myalgic encephalomyelitis and very little about fibromyalgia, which have some similarities to long COVID. I wanted to know, while I was in the dark, who were the people learning about these disorders and what were they learning? Luckily, recently I was able to sit down with Todd Davenport, a tenured professor of physical therapy and the chair of the Department of Physical Therapy at the University of the Pacific in Stockton, California. Many of you might know Todd from his advocacy and active presence in the long COVID space. He is not only an experienced physical therapist and an active clinician, he has specialized in fatigue-related disorders for over 15 years. He studied myalgic encephalomyelitis, and he's applying what he's learned to long COVID. Todd works closely with the Workwell Foundation, whose founder, Stacy Stevens, is an exercise physiologist and a patient with ME. Workwell studies fatigue-related disorders and offers patients specialized testing like the 2-day CPET, which Todd and I discuss in this episode, to better understand and manage their symptoms. Todd and I talk about medical history, about advocacy, and he also provides practical advice on how to partner with a physical therapist, even if, and maybe especially because, you have limitations in exercise. We cover a lot, so let's get started. Todd, thank you so much for joining us. We're really lucky to have you.
Well, that's kind of you to say that. Thank you for having me. This is a real treat. I think this is a treat for me to be on, and I'm lucky to be here. So thanks.
So I wanted to focus this, or at least start this conversation talking about your experience in the world of myalgic encephalomyelitis, sometimes called chronic fatigue syndrome. We know in general as patients learning about ME/CFS that there are similarities. It might not be a total biologically the same disease process, but there's certainly a lot of overlap in the two conditions in terms of the demographic of patients who are suffering from the diseases, in terms of the way it is understood or poorly understood by medicine with a capital M, and because there are very few known biomarkers right now. So our disease process or our progress depends on patient reports. And all of those, factors together make it easy for medical professionals to doubt that we actually are struggling with symptoms. And so there is a big level of bias within this field. But even if we don't want to call it bias, there's real obstacles to finding a cure for long COVID. And I think some of those obstacles, or at least I sense, are very similar to the obstacles that patients with ME faced and are continuing to face. And since you have so much experience in this realm, I would love to hear your perspective and your input on what you've learned from ME that now you are seeing repeated, or maybe is different, or opportunities for long COVID.
Yeah, I mean, what a great question with a lot of interesting things to unpack. I'm a physical therapist and an exercise scientist, and I've always been interested in why people get tired. Now, obviously, post-exertional malaise, post-exertional neuroimmune exhaustion isn't just tired, but that was sort of my entree into the field. So I did a bachelor of science in exercise science, sports medicine emphasis, and I was an athlete, and I got really interested in why athletes who are tired make mental mistakes. And so then I did sort of a psychophysical experiment because I was double majoring in psychology. So I was really trying to be smart, kill two birds with one stone with this project. And so I had my friends from the swim team pedal to exhaustion on a cycle ergometer, which if you know anything about swimmers, they're in super good shape. So that took like a long time to pedal them to exhaustion. So that was the first thing I learned. And then had them essentially do a complex reaction time task to see if we could induce mental errors, delayed reaction time with physical fatigue. And then we were using ammonia inhalants, smelling salts to see if we can improve their performance. So we did kind of like a little randomized study there, and it was really fun. And I just kind of got the bug for research from that. Then fast forward to physical therapy school, where I served in a wet lab, essentially trying to understand the ways in which the neuromuscular junction morphology changes with the administration of anabolic and androgenic steroids. And that was really for benefiting, people with late stage AIDS and cancer, to try and figure out how we might improve cell mass and to determine whether some of those effects of the steroids might not have been at the level of the muscle, but also in building kind of chemo transmission across the neuromuscular junction. So that was the next thing. And the next thing was, I did some work at the NIH with the intramural team, looking into the effectiveness of some different testing that you can use for people with inflammatory muscle disease. So again, here's fatigue, but of a different etiology, rheumatologic type of an etiology. So I've been in the fatigue area for a long time, even predating the time that I knocked on the door at the Pacific Fatigue Lab, because I saw fatigue on the door after I had started my faculty appointment here at University of the Pacific. And I met Stacy Stevens, who didn't shut the door. She didn't draw the blinds. Wow. She didn't turn the light off and hide. So she brought me in and explained a little bit about what, myalgic encephalomyelitis is. And, from there, that's kind of kicked off of almost 15 years of involvement in this research area. So it's been, I've learned a lot. And I have to say that you brought up some really interesting points of, what have you seen in the field that has sort of the same. And I have to think about my first reaction to the first time I saw someone with an exercise test related to, ME/CFS. And so Stacy put down this report of two different tests. And these two different tests were from the same person on two different days. And Zeist, when I tell you that I just argued with Stacy that these have to be two different people. There's just no way this is the same person. It's totally different physiology. That I'm still mind blown every time we have someone come in and show that same test-retest effect corresponding with their symptoms, because it just kind of feels like a little bit closer to understanding the physiology of this disease, or at least one piece of it.
That's remarkable. I mean, so you were talking specifically about the cardiopulmonary exercise test, mm-hmm. right? And even before we talk about that, just thinking about fatigue as something that is common, not only to people like me with long COVID and patients with ME, but also to a host of people with other disorders and very, very healthy people.
Right.
Like fatigue impacts all of us. And you starting this by saying that when you get fatigued physically, you will most likely get fatigued cognitively. Mm-hmm. And, it's reassuring to know that we're not alone in this, that this is, most likely biologically based. I mean, undoubtedly biologically based, but not only that, it's something that is common to the human condition.
Yeah,
not
absolutely.
Just in a disordered body.
Absolutely. And
so there was
some important differences, right? Because if I get tired as someone who's not living with long COVID, not living with ME, I'm good with coffee and a nap. Like I can mm-hmm. fairly quickly, when I bring up my research to people just walking around town, hey, what do you do for a living? Well, I work at the university. Oh, okay, that's nice. What do you do there? Well, One of the things I do is science. Okay, well, what do you do? Well, I study people who have myalgic encephalomyelitis. Oh God, what is that? Well, it's people who have really deep fatigue along with other symptoms and signs that are really disabling for them. Oh yeah, gosh, I get tired too. Thank you for studying fatigue, because wow, I get tired during the day. And it's like, nope, you don't get it. That's not it. It's the whole package. It's the whole constellation of signs and symptoms. It's the deep fatigue, like nothing left. It's the bonked feeling.
Yeah.
We're making up words now because we just don't.
Yeah, I know. We have to.
Right? And it's the cognitive dysfunction. It's the, when you're crashed, you can't remember things the way you did. You can't attend to the things the way you did. There's sensitivity to light and sound. There's the headaches. There's the sleep disturbance. No one with post-exertional malaise or post-exertional neuroimmune exhaustion sleeps well. And I don't think people really understand, like, even if you sleep a lot, you don't sleep well. The quality isn't there. If you can sleep a lot, it's just, the point I'm trying to make is that even though my background was fatigue, I still went through this transition process that I see lots of clinicians doing, which is, what is this thing? You've got to be kidding me. Really? Like you get foggy brain, like you're thinking through Jello if you do too much on a day, and it takes how long to feel better? Like it strains credibility, but it's true. I mean, and we have objective evidence that this takes place.
Yeah. Well, tell me more about that learning process as a professional, as a clinician, as an academic. I was in clinical practice for 10 years. And in addition to that, in training for like 172 years before. And I never heard of ME. All I heard was, I still remember in medical school, learning that fibromyalgia, they stated finally that fibromyalgia is probably a real disease.
Wow.
And I remember that lecture because I thought, well, why wouldn't it be a real disease? But the first line was still antidepressants and approaching it from a psychiatric perspective. So I'm really interested to know, during the time of darkness where I didn't know anything about ME as a medical professional, what were you and your colleagues learning about ME, and why is it that so many medical professionals still either don't understand or misunderstand ME?
Yeah, what a great thought. My own personal process had to do with asking a ton of questions, because I was just so surprised that this cardiopulmonary exercise test could be the same person on 2 different days, because it wasn't supposed to be that way. Normally people should reproduce an exercise test, within a few percentage points. This person was
this is, to clarify, this is a cardiopulmonary exercise test where somebody gets on, to simplify it, an exercise bike attached to specialized monitors that measure your metabolism and signs of your metabolism. And a person who doesn't have ME will be on the bike and have a certain presentation of metabolism, or their metabolism works a certain way. And then somebody with ME, like you're saying, looks like 2 different people after they exert themselves. They look like 2 different bodies.
That's it. And I saw that and I thought, I have so much learning I have to do, because I didn't know any of this. And Zeest, as a physical therapist, I use exercise. And so my first insight was, oh my God, I might hurt somebody, if I haven't already, who has this, if I exercise them. So as a physical therapist, just trying to think responsibly about doing no harm, I just felt like I needed to go back to school. So I kind of immersed myself with the Workwell team to try and understand as much about this as I could. And that led to our first papers together regarding a conceptual model for how physical therapists ought to take care of patients with ME. This was back in 2010. So it probably is worth an update now because we do know a little bit more. And then our first paper documenting this test retest effect that we've been talking about being two different people, a different person on two different days, but the same person. So I sort of had the luxury as a clinical academic of learning through doing, and being able to ask questions with a supportive team. I don't think people have that. I think people sort of stop at wow, that sounds really incredible, so that can't be credible, and that's where the thought process stops. And I think throughout clinical practice and medical education, that's sort of where we've been, which has led to this. Prior to the SARS-CoV-2 pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, it led to ME being probably the most common thing people had never heard of before. Several 100,000 to 2 million people living with this prior to the pandemic, and obviously now more because SARS-CoV-2 has been triggering cases of ME/CFS pretty commonly. So. I think we're still sort of stuck in the past. We're stuck in the pre-pandemic era, the before times of, having this luxury of being ignorant to this condition, but we're just not there anymore. We should be past the point where we find people to be credible.
So how was that research paper that you did with Workwell and the studies that you did, how were they received among physical therapy academia? And what was, I guess, related to that, how did physical therapy as a field think about ME, and how have you tried to maybe change that?
I think for the most part, the reception in physical therapy has been more positive than in other areas. I've heard stories of my colleagues being accused of not understanding their equipment, or it's not calibrated correctly. It can't be right. How could that data possibly be correct? We've never run into that in a physical therapy audience. People are generally pretty receptive. And I think it's because PTs have the luxury of spending a little more time with patients, and often are ones that kind of help pick up the pieces when the answers are difficult and need a little bit further exploration, time for exploration. I think, other healthcare practitioners, my physician colleagues, just don't have the time to spend to figure this out. I mean, not everything is house, where you've got a team of residents and fellows around a whiteboard trying to solve this challenging case. It's just like, well, I've got like 5 minutes to get this figured out. And so I the physical therapy community has been largely receptive. And we've tried to do a lot of education with that group, because we find that physical therapists, occupational therapists can give critical information and feedback to our physician colleagues to help inform a diagnosis. And so we just need to be kind of sensible and sensitive about that process to try and gather that information that might help the patient towards a more effective treatment plan. So that's kind of where we've attacked this. And we've done this from the perspective of national, international conferences. We have a hard time saying no to any speaking engagement. We not only do we love talking about this and spreading the word, but there's just a really deep importance for people to sort of hear and understand what the message is. Yeah,
that's so reassuring to hear that physical therapists are open to this as a group. It's certainly been my experience working with my physical therapist to be able to move without injuring myself, and to be very honest and get direct feedback from her, and like very quick modifications in our recovery plan, or like our treatment plan, based on how my body is doing at that moment. It's a dynamic disease. Physical therapy seems to respond to that dynamism in a way that my field is not, built to do. And I guess it makes sense then, even though exercise is sort of what you think of when you think of physical therapy, at least people in general, that physical therapy is open to admitting that, well, it's not the panacea in all cases, and we can modify our treatment based on what our patients need. I guess it makes sense then that I see physical therapists and their medical counterparts, physiatrists, being voices in now the long COVID space.
Yeah.
Does that make sense to you? Does that sound about right? And do you think of yourself as in advocacy?
Yeah, I think that does sound right. And, in fairness, a lot of what I've done, sort of during this pandemic is online webinars. So if people are throwing Rotten Tomatoes, they're hitting their computer screens, and that gets expensive after a while. So maybe I'm not catching the full, impact of anyone who may disagree. But I do know that there are some physical therapists out there that don't think long COVID is a thing. They think that, it's a post-vaccination syndrome. It's, we run the gamut, just like any other profession of thoughts, erroneous and otherwise. I don't know if I see myself so much as an advocate, honestly. I see myself as a clinician and as a researcher and as an educator. And I think the bar for being an advocate in this space is really low. All you have to do is listen to people with lived experience, read the science, and then just sort of, use your common sense. And if that makes me an advocate, I guess I'm an advocate. But I see myself as following a scientific process and kind of a program of lifelong learning that has involved really trying to understand this particular area of clinical practice.
Well, we all appreciate it. And common sense, as a lot of people say, isn't common. And we're hitting a lot of barriers as patients with long COVID in getting and accessing treatment, in accessing reliable treatment, and finding professionals who have expertise and information about our disease process without us having to, become experts ourselves. When the pandemic started, was a post-viral illness like long COVID on your radar? What did you anticipate, and what did you see in terms of similarities and differences between the way long COVID was presenting and how it was being responded to?
Yeah, prior to the pandemic, we knew that infections were a common precipitating factor for ME. Somewhere on the order of 3/4 of people were thought to have some kind of precipitating infection, and by infection I mean it could have been a virus or a bacterium, but some kind of an illness, prodromal illness, from which the patient either initially got better and then got worse, or just got sick and never got better. And so because viruses were rolled up in, the previously known precipitating factors for ME, it wasn't a big leap for those of us in the community to start thinking that there might be the possibility of a long SARS or a long COVID. I mean, we knew from the first SARS outbreak that, many of those folks have chronic health problems, even 20 some odd years later. And so, a virus in the same family was not beyond the realm of imagination. It could happen again. And so, there was some chatter on social media, even as early as sort of March and April of 2020, of folks warning that, hey, there may be a long SARS type of an illness, and come to find out that in fact that's turned out to be the case, and in a good majority of people, actually, according to some cross-sectional studies.
Long COVID hit headlines in a way that ME did not, right? So how was that for you as someone who has experience and worked with patients with ME and was studying this, likely post-infectious or possibly post-infectious illness? How was it to see this a very similar disease process being sort of quote unquote discovered
Yeah.
by the greater population?
Honestly, it made me sad. It continues to make me sad. It's a source of sorrow for me that so many people have discovered this and discovered this the hard way. Because I don't think it needed to be this way. I think now the cat's out of the bag, and the society has decided that this, this is not a priority. I remember thinking when I was going through the Lodi, California Costco, when we were all lined up and I just needed toilet paper. And we're masked up, gloved up, because that's what that was what we were told to do. And I remember going out my few forays into the community, and I'm thinking, I'm looking around at the empty shelves, and I'm thinking, you know what, we need to change. Something needs to change. Something's got to change, and nothing has changed. Just the shelves are restocked, and we've decided to continue on as usual. Really the sorrow continues, because what this means is we're continuing to create as a society additional cases of chronic post-viral disease that aren't necessary, and wouldn't have been conceived of prior to the COVID-19 pandemic. And, along with that, Mr. Rogers always says, in a scary situation, look for the helpers. And so I've tried to be a helper in terms of sharing what we've learned. And so this kind of gets back to if part of living with this disease is making a core competency of healthcare practitioners to help people living with chronic post-viral disease, then I feel compelled to help with that.
Yeah, it's so appreciated. What did you make of the way medical research approached long COVID?
People who are new need to learn. They have the same needs to learn that anyone has sort of gone through. And so largely to date, what I've seen in long COVID research is a lot of stuff that we've known for maybe 30 years in ME. And, maybe there's some wisdom to replication. If you replicate a finding, there's reliability, gives you a greater sense that it's real. It also gives you the opportunity to sort of train yourself, train your team in a certain methodology that maybe has been used before in ME, but we're now using in long COVID. So I haven't seen a lot of new. I mean, I think there's some important differences in disease presentation between long COVID and ME, in terms of maybe an increase in, some of the vascular consequences that we see, some of the pulmonary consequences we see, olfactory consequences in long COVID that we just didn't see as much in ME. But, for the most part, I have to say that, by the time people with long COVID are starting to express post-exertional malaise or post-exertional neuroimmune exhaustion, it's been a lot the same that we've seen with ME. So haven't really gotten the sense that the body of long COVID research has used existing ME research as so much as scaffolding, as much as they're building around and over. And so, regardless of what I'm thinking about that, I'm not the one doing the work. So the work is ongoing. But, I don't know that I've read a whole lot new in long COVID yet that I haven't already seen in ME.
That's a little, maybe not surprising, maybe a little bit disappointing. What do you think about the future of research for both long COVID and ME? Do you think we're close to clarifying at least phenotypes or a marker, or what do you expect down the pike?
Yeah, I mean, and I guess I'm over disappointment. I'm kind of at, it is what it is. It is how it progressed, and it will continue to go. I would like to sort of see ME comparison arms in long COVID studies, because I really do think that there is a spectrum of disease there, where maybe people with long COVID have maybe a newer or maybe an earlier form of ME. I think there's a lot of striking similarities between the conditions. I'm not saying that ME is exactly the same as long COVID. I'm not saying that people with long COVID need to assume the identity of ME. That's fraught. I think people get to choose their own labels. I think as a scientist, it makes sense to see where they're the same and where there's difference, and where there may be some common benefit in looking into them either together or apart, and thinking about that critically instead of setting up a long COVID program versus an ME program, for example. And sort of not forgetting that we do have a whole host of people who lived before the pandemic who had ME, and some people with ME who now have long COVID, because, as Hickham's dictum, suggests, a patient can have as many diagnoses as they damn well please. So you have a lot of cross kind of pollination between the conditions now that merits looking into. So I'm very much like we go this way together type of a person, and I think I think about that with my science too.
Well, fingers crossed that we get some answers in the future, and hopefully in the near future. Let's talk about what we can do as patients today. I think a lot of patients, when they think of being sick, they think of going to a physician, to their doctor. They see a nurse, they see a nurse practitioner, or an MD or a DO. And then they think about referrals to people with the same credentials. I remember in my residency on one of my pain rotations, I worked closely with a physiatrist who I remember telling me, she told all of us residents, look at your health insurance at the beginning of the year and determine how many visits with your physical therapist that you're allowed, and use every single one.
Love it.
So long COVID patients, we worry about overexerting ourselves. We worry about exercise. And also physical therapy and physical therapists can be phenomenally helpful resources to us. Can you talk to us about how a long COVID patient might be able to collaborate safely with a physical therapist?
Yeah, great question. So my first piece of advice is to get to know your physical therapist before you go in for that first session. Do an introductory call. It's okay to pick our brains before you even come into the office about what we might know or may think about or may self-identify as needing to learn about you before you come in. Not every physical therapist is going to know everything there is to know about ME. We're working on a set of educational competencies for physical therapy education programs, but we have no illusions that's going to be rolled out anytime soon. So it's going to be piecemeal, and largely, folks who have taken courses and trained from, our group and other groups who are doing the work out in the field to try and educate physical therapists, occupational therapists, speech language pathologists, and so forth. So get to know your PT. And if that you don't get a good vibe from your PT, it's okay to ask for another PT. When you call in for your first appointment, you may ask, would you please schedule my appointment with somebody who knows about this condition? And if that office staff member doesn't have a resource for you, then they can look into it for you. So you can also kind of leverage that as well. The therapeutic relationship is critical, regardless of the reason that you're seeing your physical therapist. And so you need to feel safe with your physical therapist. You need to be able to communicate well with your physical therapist and believe you're being heard, and that you're heard in ways that influence the development of your treatment program, that you feel like you have some collaborative power in that relationship. Because the only constant with post-exertional malaise is change, and so your physical therapist is going to have to listen, accommodate, and adapt. And if they can't do that, then it's probably just not going to be a fit. And I would say if your physical therapist is really sort of pushing you into something that you're not comfortable with, to think about that. Because if you feel like you're being pushed into an exercise program, for example, and you're not you're either not ready for it, or you're feeling like your symptoms are worse because of it, or may get worse because of it. It's not an unreasonable thing for you to think. And so find to fire your physical therapist. As much as I hate to say it, you need to be in a place where you feel safe and heard.
Yeah, because physical therapy is not the same as exercise therapy,
That's
right? Physical therapists can help you with stiffness. They can help you with mobility without necessarily, um, giving you a cardiovascular workout. And they can help you perform those mobility exercises with correct positioning, and isolating, muscles or parts of your body that need a little help without the risk or lowering your risk of injury by trying to do it yourself.
Yeah.
So it is more than, meeting with a physical therapist doesn't mean you're going to start a cardiovascular exercise
That's
program.
a good point. Physical is in the name. And physical therapy is more than just sort of a set treatment. There are lots of strategies and specialized skills that we can bring to bear to help a person. And probably the chief among them would be to really help with a pacing plan, which is sort of the antithesis of exercise. It's like the opposite. So, so just those things to kind of consider as you're selecting a physical therapist to work with.
That's right. And now that you mentioned that, my physical therapist has absolutely helped me with a pacing program. And every time we meet, the first thing we do is review how it's been since the last session. So I feel very lucky that, I'm collaborating with a physical therapist who meets my needs, and I hope for the same for everybody else.
Sounds like you got a good one.
Yeah, and you know her, so you work with her, so she's great. Yeah. Tell me about physical therapy testing. We talked a little bit about a CPET. We described it a bit. Should consider getting a 2-day CPET, cardiopulmonary exercise test?
Well, let me start by saying that if we just listened to patients' lived experience, and found it to be credible and acted accordingly, we might cut down on the need for 2-day CPETs. Where the 2-day CPET is important, there are two reasons. The first is diagnosis, because you do get good information about the heart and lungs, very good information about how the body produces and consumes energy, and it can really help with the differential diagnosis. ME/CFS is still considered to be a diagnosis of exclusion, although that's sticky because people with ME/CFS or with long COVID can have many different health conditions. But this, if a problem with the heart and lungs or a problem with your metabolism is part of that, then the CPET can help tease apart what part might be attributable to another problem versus what might be long COVID, what might be ME. So that's the first piece. And the second piece is that a CPET is admissible evidence to Social Security disability hearings, as well as other types of disability insurance. So if you're looking for objective evidence of impairment, then the 2-day CPET is one potential way to go.
Anything else about physical therapy that you think we should know?
I think we covered it.
Yeah.
My sense is that physical therapists, occupational therapists can be really strong partners. And, it's okay to figure out what that person knows before you see them. And it's okay to get a good vibe check on them to see if you'll fit. And if you find that you won't fit, don't be afraid to switch. It is fine to do that. And it's just part of clinical life. So be just, again, reinforcing to feel safe, be comfortable, and find yourself a partner and an ally.
Those are words that we should apply to all of our collaborations, I think.
Yeah.
Well, as we wrap up, we're going to move into a segment that I call In My Professional Opinion, where I ask an expert like you your opinion on something that has absolutely nothing to do with long COVID.
Oh, cool.
Are you up for it?
I'm up for it.
So anyone who follows you, and, we didn't get a chance to talk about your online presence or how patients can use the interwebs. But if anyone follows you, they know that you are a sports fan.
I'm a sports fan.
So I have a sports question for you that, while is not related to long COVID, is also very important and might be telling. So if I'm going to ask you a question about Shohei Ohtani. For those who don't know, Shohei, or Showtime, as he's often referred to, is a Major League Baseball player who plays for the LA Dodgers. He is the highest paid baseball player currently, and he is originally from Japan. He is currently embroiled in a gambling controversy, and he claims that his Japanese to English interpreter stole $16 million from him and used it on gambling. Professor Davenport, chair of University of Pacific Department of Physical Therapy, in your professional opinion, what is the best way to squander $16 million?
Oh,
and please remember that the word squander means to waste recklessly. Wow. So no responsible answers are accepted.
Wow. That's a really hard question, because I thought you were going to ask me about Shohei, and I'm a Giants fan. So I am programmed to have this visceral dislike of the Dodgers. And honestly, he wasn't even on my radar before he played for the Dodgers. He was just totally, he was fine. But now that he plays for the Dodgers, I just have to dislike him. But $16 million, gosh. I mean, all the stuff that I think of off the top of my head is responsible stuff. But responsibility is in the eye of the beholder, I guess. I think I'm buying some land in the mountains where I don't get Wi-Fi. It's the only place I can unplug. So, sometimes I go camping just out of cell range, so I can't use my phone. It's the only time I can put my phone down. So I think that's what I would do, but I don't know if that's irresponsible. Is that irresponsible?
I think it's irresponsible enough. I think it is that you are using it for your own benefit.
Yeah, I kind of feel like that's that's at least self-centered if it's not irresponsible.
And I think that passes.
I don't know. Gosh, what would I do that was to be totally irresponsible? I have to work on this because I feel like I should have an answer for that. Yeah, that's kind of what I would do is I'd just buy some land and I would camp on it. I wouldn't even build a house. I just camp on it.
We'll take that as an answer. It's quasi-responsible.
Fair enough.
You
quasi-responsible. I love it. I pass as irresponsible. Awesome.
You passed this time.
That was
Todd,
hard.
thank you so much.
We really appreciate the chance to be on with you, and I just wish you all the best in this venture. It's just so important what you're doing to help spread the word about long COVID and build community, and just make sure people have good information. So thanks for what you do. This was really fun to be on with you today.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks for spending the time with us.
Thank you again.
I hope you enjoyed that episode of the Long COVID MD podcast. It is always a joy, and I always learn something from talking with Todd. Hopefully we'll have him back on the podcast again soon. Until then, consider and following this podcast wherever you're listening and leaving a positive review if it's possible. Follow me on Twitter at Dr_Zeist. Reach out to me by email with topic ideas or any feedback, or just tell me your story at longcovidmd@gmail.com. Until next time, take good care of yourself, and bye for now.